So welcome to the May webinar for the Worker Protection Standard. Today we're going to cover the training requirements listed in the WPS How to Comply Manual. My name is Jolene Warnke. I'm the Program Manager for the Commercial and Non-Commercial Pesticide Safety and Environmental Education Program with the University of Minnesota Extension. And I am joined with Gregorio Mendez Ortega with the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. And we have a nice presentation for you today, plenty of time for questions and answers. You're welcome to use the chat box or unmute yourself during any time to ask a question. So let's get started. So again, I want to refer to the How to Comply Manual as your reference for all of the material that we're covering. The webinars are designed to give you the highlights with diving into certain specific topics a little bit more deeply, but there's still is additional information in the How to Comply Manual that you want to review in order to have a complete understanding of your expectations and requirements. If you don't have a copy of the How to Comply Manual, I will show you the resources at the end where you can obtain this free downloads, or if you email me, I will send out a packet of printed materials. We do send one packet to per person, regardless of how many webinars you attend. But if you haven't received one already, you can send me an email and I'll be happy to get those in the mail to you. So again, free printed materials to those who email me. When does the WPS apply? We start all of our presentations with this slide to make sure that everybody's on the same page as when this Worker Protection Standard applies. You definitely want to look for the agricultural use requirements box on a label. That's sort of your first indicator that this product may have an agricultural requirement for WPS. But I have found at least one label recently that does not have an agricultural use requirements box, but rather just some text in a paragraph that refers to the WPS. So I've modified my slide to say, or a WPS reference, whichever one you see. It must also be a product that is being used on an agricultural establishment. Again, what is an agricultural establishment? That is listed in the How to Comply Manual, and directly related to the production of an agricultural plant. So we're not talking about anything related to livestock here, strictly agricultural plants. So as a reminder, the WPS applies if you are using general use or restricted use pesticides. So if, again, that product contains the agricultural use box, then it doesn't matter if it's a general use or restricted use pesticide, you would comply with the WPS. There are some minimum risk products, we call them 25Bs, that may not have an agricultural use box on the label. And in those cases, then the WPS would not apply. So we're going to dive right into when is training required. So this information starts on page 27, but there are several different sections within the manual that you'll want to refer to. I put sort of the beginning page of each of the sections on the slides, but know that sometimes there's more than one page full of information. All workers and handlers must receive training. There is no grace period for training from the time that they're going to go out into the treated area or the time that they're actually going to work with pesticides. Training is required every 12 months. Training must be in a language or manner that the handlers can understand, and then workers or handlers can understand. Keep records for 2 years on the establishment and be able to provide those training records to the employees upon request. So there are several different, we'll cover workers and handlers. And as a reminder, the definition for handler is much more than just applying the pesticides. It can be individuals who are working with the used containers, whether they're rinsing, cleaning, or recycling them, or preparing them for disposal. Those that act as support staff, whether it's flaggers for aerial application or other similar ground duties, or again, mixers and loaders, even if they're not actually making the applications themselves. There are some exceptions for training requirements. So certified applicators are not required to have additional training. In Minnesota, that would be a person who either holds a private applicator license or a commercial or non-commercial license with, for the most part, these three categories. Category C, which covers field crops. Category E, turf and ornamental, if they are working in a nursery or greenhouse environment. Or category O, soil fumigation, if that's on an agricultural site. So these are the three general categories that a person would have working in an agricultural setting. There might be some exceptions, but I think I covered most of it here. The other exception for training is certified crop advisors if they have been actually certified through a national or state approved program. So if they're ISA or CCA and they've gone through an actual certification exam, and then they're doing like continuing education and they're current, then CCAs do not have to go through additional WPS training. However, there's a lot of organizations or industry that we have that has certified or has crop advisors on staff, where they're salespeople or they're marketing individuals, or maybe they are agricultural consultants, but they haven't actually gone through a certified program. So those people would not be exempt, but those who hold a certification are. And then there are exemptions for immediate family members when the immediate family member qualifications for that establishment apply. And we cover that in another webinar a little bit more in depth. So you must also use EPA approved training materials, and I'll show you those in this presentation. Who can conduct this training? Well, it can be a current certified applicator, and that's really in any category. So even though I mentioned the category C, E, and O for those that would primarily touch agricultural establishments, technically, according to EPA's regulation, it can be any category that they're certified in because they've covered the basic pesticide safety to get there. Or it can also be a state, tribe, or federal designated trainer. Those would be people like me with the University of Minnesota Extension, or Gregorio with the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, or there could be some other individuals who've also been designated with that ability. But also, if you just don't have access to either one of those individuals, you can have a person complete an approved EPA WPS Train the Trainer course. And that can be a safety officer, an HR individual, a lead supervisor. It doesn't have to have an authority figure attached to it, but a person who completes the Train the Trainer course is also qualified to provide the training. And you can find these training materials and the online Train the Trainer course at the PERC website, which we'll dive into a little bit more, but that website is pesticideresources.org. We'll start with the requirements for training workers. So again, workers are individuals who are not applying or directly using the pesticide. They aren't working with the application equipment. They're not mixing, loading, disposing of containers. They are doing other tasks on site that are not directly related to pesticide use. So this would be weeding, seeding, harvesting, working with irrigation equipment. They can apply fertilizers. That's not covered under the WPS. So there are other things that people can do that are not related to pesticides. They would be considered workers, but because they are working in treated areas, they will require additional information, which falls under the training requirements. So again, there's no grace period for training, but that time clock starts when an application is made. So early in the year, when, right after the snow thaw and the fields are just uncovered, and maybe we're just prepping fields, we're tilling, we're weeding, we're hand weeding or something like that. The WPS doesn't start then. It starts when the first application is made. So you may go through a good portion of your season and not have to fulfill this requirement, but when you have to do an application, a pesticide application, then it has to be done before those people can enter that treated area. The training is also required every 12 months. Excuse me, and you must train in a language or manner that the handlers can understand. And we'll cover that a little bit more. Again, keep those records for 2 years and then provide those training records to employees if they request it. Sorry about my delay in pictures here. All right, again, if a worker is already trained as a handler, or they are a certified applicator, or somewhere along the way they obtain a certification, then they do not need additional training. So if they've already been trained as a handler, that's good for a year. If they are a certified applicator, then it's during whatever the cycle is for their certification. In Minnesota, it's usually 3 years for a private applicator or 3 years for the category C, commercial or non-commercial. So let's talk a little bit about early entry workers. So this starts on page 49. Early entry workers are people who go into a treated area before the REI has expired. So when we look at various different pesticide labels in the agricultural use requirements box, it's going to list a restricted entry interval, the REI. Sometimes it's 4 hours, sometimes it's 3 days, whatever that time frame is. If somebody has to enter that space within that time, they are considered early entry workers. However, the reason they're entering is really limited in time and situation. So it's not just, oh, we want to get a jump on harvesting. It's, even though the REI is in place, we want early entry workers to go in and start working sooner than later. But rather, oh no, we've had an irrigation incident and we need to get the equipment set up, or maybe we're expecting a storm and we need to pull things out of the field, that kind of thing. So there are some very specific limitations listed in the How to Comply manual on what early entry workers can do and why they should be allowed to enter in the field when the REI is still in place. Under all circumstances, though, no one's allowed within that treated area for 4 hours following the application. So there is a limitation there. There is, I believe, and Gregorio can correct me, there is probably an emergency situation that may apply within that 4 hours, but emergency is pretty well defined on what that might be. Like life is in danger kind of emergency. All early entry workers must be 18. They also must be trained as handlers so that they're familiar for the pesticide safety risks. They must be provided the PPE listed as the early entry worker on the label. So again, this is also going to be found in the agricultural use box, and that PPE may differ. The early entry worker PPE may differ from other WPS handler PPE or from the general label PPE. So make sure that you take note of that. They must also have read the label of the actual products that were used or have been informed of all the labeling requirements and statements that's related to human hazard, precautions, first aid, and user safety, which can be pretty substantial on some of these labels. So this is not something that you would try to rush right before you need to send somebody out in the field, but rather give them, some time to be able to review this information and be prepared. So now moving on to the requirements for handlers. Again, the handlers are more than just the applicators. They're touching or having some influence from containers, equipment, or some level of exposure to the pesticide during application. There's no grace period again for training. Training is required every 12 months in a language or manner that handlers can understand. Records still have to be kept for 2 years and provided to employees upon request. So that part is no different than the workers or the early entry workers. Certified applicators do not need additional training. So again, if they have a certification, we call them licenses in Minnesota, but it's the same thing. If they have a private applicator's license, commercial or non-commercial, they do not need additional WPS specific training. It does include, again, the handling of general use or restricted use pesticide products, assuming that it has an agricultural use box on it. It does not include any fertilizer or nutrient only products. So again, if it doesn't have a pesticide ingredient, just fertilizer, not weed and feed, but just fertilizer, or nutrient only, your nutrient management for fields or soils, there's no requirement there. The handler must read or be informed again of all the sections of the pesticide product labeling, which include the safe use of the pesticide, the label use and directions. The label must be available to the handler at all times, and that's where a lot of our central posting requirements come in, which we have in another webinar. And it must include information specific to that application, which would include those entry restrictions, the applicator exclusion zone, which we refer to as AEZ, and that restricted entry interval. A lot of this is found on the label, except AEZs are not found on the label, but there's information in the How to Comply manual. Pesticide handlers must also have application-specific information above and beyond the pesticide label. So this would be the safe operation of the equipment that's used to mix, load, transfer, or apply the pesticides before they use it. They must be taught daily inspection of equipment for leaks, clogged nozzles, worn or damaged parts. And they must repair or replace or have these items repaired or replaced before that equipment is used. So we know that they themselves may not have to repair the equipment, but it has to be repaired or replaced before they're allowed to use that piece of equipment. So moving on to record keeping requirements. First, how do we even do the training? So you have to use EPA approved materials, which are found on the PERC website, which I'll again share with you by the end of this presentation. You must present the training orally from written materials or audio visually. So what that means is you can't hand somebody a book or a PowerPoint presentation for them to review on their own. There has to be an oral auditory version of this to be performed, and accommodations also need to be met where necessary. It has to be presented present the information in a manner that the trainees can understand, and that may involve using a translator. We also have some other tools available for training materials like flip charts, which are more visual, where somebody is reading the material, but the audience is looking more at like pictures or visual diagrams of the actions that they have to perform or the safety precautions that they have to take. So it's not all, scripted PowerPoint requirements. We also have just videos, that you can use that cover all that material as well. The trainer must be present at all times during the training so that they can answer questions and stop and start the video as needed. It's not a situation where you can pop the video in and then leave the room and come back in 30 minutes and then say, everybody got it, like you have to be there and present and make sure everything is all going smoothly. If there's any questions or misunderstandings, that you can address them. Again, you also have to ensure that the training is in an environment that's relatively free of distractions. So we don't all have nice meeting rooms, or you don't have access to high-powered audio-visual equipment, and that's fine. You can do field trainings, again, using those flip books or non-electronic devices, as long as it's presented orally or in a manner they can understand. But it's really difficult, if you're trying to be out in the field and you've literally have mechanical equipment going on around you and individuals can't really hear what you're saying, or they're having to constantly move out of the way or something like that. So you have to provide a training that's safe and secure and that they can actually, be able to focus on the material that you're presenting to them. Now, for training records, there's no official WPS training record template or Minnesota specific training record template, but I am going to show you an example of one that you can use, and you can create your own as long as it contains this information. You must keep them on the establishment for 2 years from the date of the training, and that record has to include the worker or handler's printed name and their signature, the date of the training, the trainer's name, and then their qualifications to train. So if they're a certified applicator, it's usually their license number, if an expiration date. If they've gone through the train the trainer course, they'll have some reference number that they can use from their certificate. Also includes the employer's name and the information that shows what materials they use. And I'll show you what that looks like on the website in just a minute. So here's an example of a training verification record. This is very plain, very simple. You can recreate this yourself, or I can provide it to you digitally. It basically just has like the employer's name, the farm name, because there's could be multiple properties or subsidiaries of a particular employer, the trainer's name and their certification number. So whatever is showing that they have the right qualifications to do the training. The year of the training, what the EPA approval number for the training materials is, and whether they're doing worker or handler training or both. And if you're using like the video, it's, I don't know the exact minutes, but I think it's like 37 minutes is the worker training. And then there's like an additional 5 or 7 minutes for handler training. So it's kind of built in. They're not necessarily like whole separate trainings. There's just a continuum that you can use. And then as you can see, it captures the employee, worker or handler's name, their signature, whether they've been trained as a worker, handler, or both. So when you go to the PERC website, and again, that's pesticideresources.org, you'll come to this main page and you'll see very clearly in the middle there, WPS training materials. And then within that first paragraph, it says, see an inventory of WPS training materials. And we do have some things in English and some things in Spanish. And they're working on there are some other materials in other languages, but not necessarily all the training materials that you need. So when you click on inventory of WPS training materials, you'll see this page here. And this order may change depending on what your computer's default settings are, but you'll have this table. And you're going to look for EPA approvals. And then the part that's highlighted in yellow is the EPA approval number for that specific item that you're using. So in this case, it's the curriculum for in-person delivery of a train the trainer course. And it's for the trainers of handlers, trainers of workers, ag employers, or handler employees. And then it has an EPA approval number there. So this would not be one that you would use for handlers or workers specifically, but if you're doing the train the trainer. And you can scroll through here. If you go to the far right, you'll see file type. And you'll see whether it's a presentation, it's usually PowerPoint, whether it's just a document or a video or something else, So you can scroll through the different ones. If you're specifically looking for videos, you can sort by videos and then choose from there. And you'll see that the last item in this list here is an agricultural worker and handler pesticide safety training video. And I didn't capture all of the information, but where it says EPA worker and handler in black, then it would have the approval number underneath that. And you would just put that on the training record. Where are you going to find more information? So first and foremost, we do have the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, which is Gregorio, and he'll have some time to talk to you in just a minute. He offers compliance assistance, does inspections, and has some training materials available. Also through my program with the University of Minnesota Pesticide Safety and Environmental Education Program, we have lots of training materials that we can send to you. We can also provide some training assistance and answer general questions. However, I really don't touch on the regulatory side of compliance assistance or inspections or inspection requirements. I can lead you to documents or any of the materials that we have, but I will defer you to the MDA for those more specific regulation questions. And then again, like I mentioned, the PERC website, pesticideresources.org, is supposed to be .org, and training materials, compliance library, or general information. And again, this is really the only clearinghouse that we have for the training materials that's like comprehensive and in one place. So you will go there and that's where you'll find all the EPA approved materials. Minnesota will direct everybody to this site. We don't have our own site that has something separate. All right, so now I'm going to turn it over to Gregorio, who's going to either elaborate or give you some updates on some additional information.
Yeah, thanks, Jolene. I believe we have a question in the chat box. Alan is.
So it says, we have a number of people who would like this training, but are out in the field planting. Will this be available online after the webinar? So if you're talking about the actual webinar that we're doing right this minute, yes, we post that as a video on YouTube. on our YouTube channel, and I'll send out an email to everybody who participated today that has the resources. So you'll be able to find that there. If you're talking about needing WPS training, then again, that's where the pesticide resources comes into play. So hopefully that answered your question, Alan. All right. I think
Okay, moving on. Jolene, you covered most of all the requirements for the training, for the pesticide safety training for workers and handlers. There is a little bit that I can add. I just wanted to emphasize a couple of things, especially on the training. One, you mentioned it. It is that the location where the training is taking place. That's very important, because some of the provisions actually in the rule, it calls for that. It has to be provided in a way that is understood by the trainees, and not only with the language, but also in the way that is being offered. And if there is the trainer is offered by using a video, make sure that people can hear what is being said, if the screen can be seen, and there is no distractions. That is very important. Also, with the trainer, they must remain in the room during the duration of the pesticide safety training. And with that, to answer any questions that might arise during the training or after, but also all the material the EPA has approved, there is a section that needs to be added or talked about by the trainer. And this is for the establishment specific information, which only the establishment has it. And I will be telling the workers and the handlers where the central location is, so they can find the 30-day application record there, the pesticide safety information, the safety data sheets. So where is it going to be located? Also where the contamination stations are placed. The decontamination supplies are stored so they can access them. They can, and this is only what the establishment has that information. What is the emergency protocol in case that there might be a alleged or potential pesticide exposure? What the workers or the handlers needs to do, and that's also needs to be addressed by the trainer. And of course, the very important also keep the records. Record keeping is very essential for this part of the training. So yeah, that's most of what I can say. And one more thing, a plugin. You mentioned also that we offer the compliance assistance, and thank you for those ones. They have contact us and request a compliance assistance. Anytime that you want to schedule one, just give us a call. MDA, give me a call. I will put my contact information in the chat box, and then send me an email, a call. We schedule a compliance assistance, and we'll take them from there. We have also material that we can't share with you, but I think Jolene, you might have more than we do. So that's yeah, what I have. Back to you.
All right. Thanks, Gregorio. Yeah, the compliance assistant, we've had several people who've attended webinars who've requested that. And that's an excellent way for you to find out if your facility, your establishment has everything it needs to have to fulfill the WPS requirements, and also record keeping, and answer any questions that you have on your specific site. So thanks, Gregorio, for adding that. And that was a great segue into what we're going to cover next month, which has to do with central posting, record keeping, and some designated representative information. So when Gregorio was referring to, there's additional information that goes into the training to the workers and handlers. They have to know where to find this information, where to find the emergency protocol. And that's all part of the central posting section. And again, you can read that in the How to Comply manual, but we will have a webinar next month, which is June 12th. on Monday, and I apologize that we had to reschedule this particular webinar. I was having some technical difficulties that I could not resolve before the start time, so I had to reschedule. But next month's on board for June 12th at 10:30 a.m. and that will be what we cover. Again, here's our contact information. If you have any questions regarding this series, WPS in general, or again, you're looking for a compliance inspection, please reach out to Gregorio. I will send an email following this webinar with a request for you to complete an evaluation, and then also a reminder of the resources that we listed in this site. So please take a moment to look that over. And with that, I'll open it up to anybody who has questions. It's all you, Alan.
It looks like this is going to be covered next month, but we're about to have a meeting on this exact topic, so I wanted to ask. There's the verbal and or written notification requirement in the WPS standard. And I'm up here at the NCROC, and it's very decentralized. And people are everywhere. Like, we don't have a really good central location to do that. Like, there's no break room that everybody uses. And we're trying to find a way to solve that. We have a Google form that we use that we put what we applied in, and it gets recorded, but not everybody gets those notifications. We're wondering if like a text to speech type application so that would call everybody and then read off the information of what was applied and where it was applied would satisfy that requirement.
Yeah, this is Gregorio. Yes, I think I can answer that question. So we're talking about notification to the workers.
Yes.
About the applications that have happened on the establishment. Different fields at different locations. They might not go to the central location every time. And how to notify them. There are different ways to notify. The one that you were explaining, as long as everybody has the access to the device, they're going to be receiving the text or the notification, and everybody understand that is a method that you are going to be using, then that will be okay. But if for some reason one worker does not have that access, then it has to be another a method of notification used as well. So then everybody has the information. You can't, the notification can be orally provided, or you can use warning sign. And you can post the warning signs before the application at the entrance of the fields that have been applied. And with that, but you have to, during the training, you have to let them know what method you're going to be using. So yes, it is not uncommon what you have there say. So if that answers your question.
Yeah, that works, because that's what we're going to do. I think we're going to send out a text to speech notification to the direct supervisors for each program, and then they'll disseminate that to their employees.
Okay.
We just wanted to make sure it actually worked, it counted.
Yep. That with the technology these days, a lot of those things are very easy to implement. The caveat here is that everybody must have access to that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and having a backup system probably isn't a bad idea. So still having a central place, even if it's not a break room, but someplace that, you know, can be a backup system if somebody doesn't have access or they do get to go to that central place. Probably not a bad idea, but it sounds like you've got a nice tool there that everybody has access to. And it's interesting how technology does help us accomplish some of these things that we weren't able to before. So thanks for that question, Alan, and thanks, Gregorio, for answering it. If there's not any more questions, I'm gonna stop recording. And I thank you so much for being here today. Again, this will be posted on our University Minnesota Extension PSEE YouTube channel for future reference. Anybody can access it. But if you have any specific information or need materials, please reach out to me and look for that email with the evaluation survey on there.